friend of mine, Mr. Shorey, texted me on Monday and said, "How do you feel?" I said, "Fine." He said, "Okay, just wondering," because a lot of times pastors have the blues after Easter. There's this great big buildup. And I'm sure it's not just for pastors, it's for, the wives that do all the cooking on Easter, Resurrection Sunday, things like that. The families that prepare their homes. There's this big build-up to family gatherings, and then there's kind of this crash that takes place throughout the week, and almost some sort of letdown that it seems like that sometimes happens. And so in those thoughts that went through my head this week, I was thinking, Jesus, where do you want us to go? Like, I'm going to end this series on the rescue story, but maybe I'm not going to end this series on the rescue story. I'm not quite sure. Where do you want us to go? And I felt like the Lord had said, continue with the resurrection. Like, we stop after Resurrection Sunday, but I want you to just keep going with the resurrection for a while, because, what he did throughout that time, throughout that week, throughout those days, those 40 days that he was here on earth, should be something that we look at to encourage us, not just the day after Resurrection Sunday, but every day of the week. And so that's where we're going to go this morning, continuing with, after looking at the greatest rescue story ever told, Resurrection Sunday, continuing with the resurrection story. And when I started this series, I think I shared with you guys, my wife and I, the favorite things that we like to watch are real life stories, true stories, whether it's something on TV or movies. We love to watch real life rescue stories. And in watching those rescue stories, I always find it interesting at the end. If you'll watch as they go through their trial and whatever it is that they're facing, some are facing being stuck in a desert and nobody's around to rescue them, and finally they get rescued. Some are in the middle of war and something takes place where they have to come to this place of rescue, and then of course there's people that have been held hostage, or there's these terrible, horrible things that have happened in their life, and they think that they're absolutely going to be killed by somebody else, and then they're rescued. And every single person's response to the rescue is different, isn't it? People respond differently to being rescued. I've seen where people are overjoyed. They're just happy that they can't wait. Now they can get moving forward in life and, get on to whatever it is. Some have this enlightenment and it changes their life. And then there's other people that, they're emotionally traumatized with what has taken place around them. Sometimes they're even in a state of disbelief. Like, is this really happening? Am I really safe right now? Have I really been rescued? Is this all real, or am I still in danger? Like, there's these questions because they're emotionally distraught in the moment. Some people even go through depression, and they begin to blame themselves for what took place in their lives, even though they've been rescued from the situation. And so they begin to look inside of themselves and question themselves. And it usually takes some assurance. Somebody say, blessed assurance. It usually takes some sort of assurance from the rescuer in order to be able to calm them down and get them to a place where they recognize, no, you are safe. Everything is under control. You are going to be okay. And you have the ability to now move forward in life with confidence. And I want you to understand this morning, the resurrection story is no different than any story that you have watched on TV or in the movies or read about. Immediately after rising from the grave, Jesus, he's conquered death and defeated sin. He's rescued humanity from both of those things. Do you know that his resurrection caused an earthquake? Both literally and figuratively. It says that the ground shook. There was an earthquake that took place. But that earthquake just wasn't for the moment in 33 AD or whatever the exact year was. That earthquake was for history. He was shaking the earth. The earth would never be the same again. I don't know if you've ever watched people coming out of an earthquake, but you see the rescue stories of them coming out of an earthquake, and usually they're somewhat shaken, aren't they? And you could say with the earthquake that the resurrection of Jesus caused upon the earth and even to his followers, it caused them to feel those exact same feelings. Yeah, they've been rescued, but there's an earthquake that just took place in my life. You got to understand, leading up to the earthquake, what state of mind they were in. Let me remind you, as we probably did last Sunday, every one of Jesus' followers had great hope. It was great hope. Like, you don't even understand. Sometimes you hope for something in life and then you get it, and it's really nice and feels good to have that for a few moments, and sometimes that hope goes away and you put your hope in something else. And I understand that as Christians, we all want to say we have our hope in Jesus and we look forward to his return, but our hope sometimes goes like this in life based upon the circumstances that are surrounding us. These guys had hope like never before. These guys had hope more than any other probably Israelite in the history of the Israelites. Like, throughout thousands of years, the Israelites have been being told that they're going to have a Savior that's going to come and rescue them as a nation of people and bring them into the light and to everything that they've been called to do, and rescue them and help them become conquerors of the earth. They were going to defeat the government. And these few group of Israelites that followed after Jesus, they fully believed that he was the Messiah that had been prophesied about from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to Isaiah and Malachi and to Ezekiel and all of the prophets, and everything that had been spoken had led up to this very moment, and they were going to be a part of that moment. They were going to be a part of the change in history. They were going to be a part of what was going to turn their people around and turn their nation upside down. They were going to be somebody because they were with somebody. They were going to be something in life. They were going to be a part of a revolution that would change the world. Their hopes were way up here, way beyond anything we could ever imagine. They were going to take the earth over, heaven on earth, because they were with the Messiah. And then to know that after the Last Supper, he would be arrested, to witness what he went through, to see on Good Friday how he would be hung on a cross, a horrible death that he would experience. These people's lives were shattered. More than just being held hostage by somebody. More than just being taken captive in a war. More than being trapped in a desert somewhere between two rocks. These people had higher hope than any one of those other people could ever possibly have had, because they believed they were with the Messiah of the world who came from heaven to earth. These people's lives were shattered. Blessed assurance. As we look at these stories over, I don't even know, probably the next, I'll be honest with you, I wrote a sermon, it's 9 pages long. Last time I did that, I preached for 2 hours on tongues, about 5, 6, 7 years ago, and my wife told me, don't ever do that again. So, I really thought in my mind that today we were going to cover, like, Jesus appears in the Gospels 8 times to his disciples before he ascends. The scriptures actually tell us of 2 more times in Corinthians how he would appear to Peter. We don't see that in the Gospels. There's potentially 10 times that he appeared. I was going to try and cover like 5 of those today. I realized at 2 o'clock in the morning on Saturday morning that wasn't going to happen. I might get stuck in the first story. So I'm going to give you point 1 of this sermon, but might be the only point today. Today, when it comes to the assurance, Jesus begins these interactions with people after the earthquake of his resurrection. And he goes to each and every individual, and mind you, he knows where they are at in his rescue story. And so he's able to give them what they need to be assured. Everybody say, blessed assurance. Point number 1 is the Jesus you need. His very first interaction after his resurrection, the very first interaction he has is with Mary Magdalene. Now, in context, Mary Magdalene goes to the tomb to try and find the body of Jesus with Peter and John, two of the closest disciples that there are. I believe that Mary was probably just as close. We see this male version of the Bible stories, and sometimes the women they're out front, which shows us the validity of the Bible, because anybody that told a story back then wouldn't have put the women out front. But they're out front. But I believe that he had some very close female disciples. And so Mary was right there with Peter and John when it came to, they had the Sabbath where they couldn't go do anything on the Sabbath. And so they couldn't wait to get to the empty tomb the first chance they had. It says, while it was still dark. So they were already, if you understand this, the Sabbath goes from sundown to sundown. Yet while it was still dark, they were kind of breaking the rules already. It says that they went to the tomb of Jesus. And they walked around the tomb, and they were looking to find his body. And Peter and John, they poke their heads in, and they see an empty tomb. And there's some stuff that's brought out of that can be a sermon for another day. But what do the guys do? Because oftentimes we're so short-minded, like, his body's not here. Let's go back to our homes. That's what it said they did. And so they wander off back to their homes. But there was another woman that was with them. And you know how women are. They're a little emotional, and so they probably didn't want to hang out and listen to a crying woman. She's there, she's sobbing, she's at the tomb, and they're like, okay, let's get out of here, and they jet. But Mary stays. Mary stays because of her heart for Jesus. Mary stays because she's longing to see him. Even if it was his dead body, she wanted to see him. And so the scriptures say this in verses 11 through 17 of John chapter 20. After Peter and John jet, it says, Mary stood outside the tomb weeping. And as she wept, she stooped down and she looked into the tomb. Like, she hasn't even looked yet. They've already looked. They left. Obviously, he's not there. But she still has the need to look for herself. And she saw two angels in white sitting, one at the head and the other at the feet where the body of Jesus had lain. In verse 13, then they said to her, the angels spoke to her, woman, why are you weeping? And she said, because they've taken away my Lord, and I don't know where they have laid him. I find it interesting. She's so distraught. Almost every time you read where there's an experience between an angel in the Bible and another person, they fall to their face, and they think that potentially this is God that's before them. Angels have cautioned people before, like, stand up. She's just like answering the angel, like, I don't know, they took my Savior's body, right? My Lord's body. Now, when she had said this, she turned around and she saw Jesus standing there and did not know that it was Jesus. And Jesus said to her the same thing the angel said. Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking? She, supposing him to be the gardener, said to him, Sir, if you had carried him away, tell me, where have you laid him? Because I'll take him away. Jesus said to her, Mary. I just imagine, as I'm reading through this, Jesus is listening to her reasoning. She's offering to carry the body if he knows where it's at. And then there's this pause. The pause of eternity. The pause of love. The pause of compassion. The pause that would want her to know something's changed. And he says her name, Mary. She turned and said to him, Rabboni, teacher, rabbi. Now listen, when we first see her, she's lost in her emotion. as probably most people would be. She's grieving for Jesus. She is looking for a man she had once put her hope in. She's looking for his dead body. So how does Jesus bring assurance to somebody who is so distraught in the moment? Point number one, he makes it personal. He makes it personal. How do you bring assurance to somebody who's so distraught? Make it personal. And so I love his initial questions when he says, why are you weeping? Who are you looking for? I almost feel like the angels had just asked her and she answered, and then Jesus has like this twinkle in his eye. And he's going to ask her all over again. Maybe he even asks her in a slightly different way. They're like, why are you weeping, woman? What are you looking for? And Jesus is like, why are you weeping? Who are you looking for? It's almost like this temptation to pay attention. Something's changed. She doesn't recognize who she is because she's traumatized in the moment. And she has the nerve to question Jesus, where Jesus is. And notice, you know how the Bible, we've talked about culturally, women were often disrespected. And when sometimes this happens both in the man and the woman's side in relationship, when questions are asked and you don't really get the answer you want, you ask the same question again and you don't really get the answer you want. You ask the same question again and you don't really get the answer you want. And so you ask the same question again. And you guys ever have that in relationship before? And what happens? On a man's side, we go biblical and we call it nagging. It's like dripping water. Right? That's what the Bible says, not Corey. Why do you keep asking the same question? Anyways, what normally happens in most relationships when the question is asked multiple times, and sometimes, like if you've built walls in your relationship up over things like this, it only takes, twice. Like, you already asked me that question type of thing. And if you give a response that the other person didn't like, that's the same response that you gave me last time. That's why I'm asking. Usually it turns into some sort of snarky conversation, doesn't it? But listen, Jesus doesn't yell at her. Jesus doesn't tell her to stop crying. He doesn't make her feel stupid for not recognizing who he is. He simply says her name, Mary. And it's all the assurance she needed. I don't know if you've ever been in a place where you absolutely positively needed to hear your name spoken to bring you assurance. But it is so relieving if it happens to you. I've probably told these stories before, but I've had it happen twice in my life. One time I was young and full of testosterone, and I was out hunting with my friends in my 20s, and we were up the river driving on the logging roads, and some elk ran across the road. And, we have a truck full of stuff for hunting. But what do we do when elk come across the road and jump off the other side? Grab the gun, barrel out the door, and we take off chasing after them. Leave everything else in the truck. So you have absolutely nothing. No coat. You don't have a backpack. You only have your rifle with bullets in it. You run down the hillside, and you didn't even pay attention to where you were. All that you know is you're chasing an animal. I got to pull the trigger. And so you're running. You can hear crunching, and so you keep running. You run this way, and you run that way, and pretty soon you hear less and less of the noises. And then you get down to a logging road, and you look around, and you think, oh, I'm just going to sit and listen for a little while. And in the pause of the moment, you think, I don't hear any animals. I don't hear any people. I don't hear a truck running. I don't know where I'm at. One time in my life, I was lost for probably 15 minutes. Felt like eternity. In that 15 minutes, I was wandering around thinking, what am I going to do? I go straight back up the hill, and I think that I should be at the road by now. Well, I'm not. I'm trying to follow right where I came running down. Little did I know that the road turned sideways where we jumped off, and there was a finger ridge that came down, and I would have went right up another mountainside on the opposite side of the way that the road went. So I come back down the logging road, and I think, if I walk long enough, I'll probably run into somebody. But in my mind, I'm thinking, I've never been lost. And so there's this little bit of like panic that's rising up inside of me. And so I think that I hear something in the trees. I'm like, oh, maybe that's one of the guys that jumped off the road with me. And so I'm like looking up through no, it's just like a grouse fluttering around. So I'm back down on the road, and I'm just thinking, I could be here all night. Do I stay here? Do I walk? What do I do? And in that little indecisiveness, and with the state of fear rising up a little bit inside of me, I hear up on the mountain, Corey, Corey. And I look up, and I see one of my hunting partners on the side of the hill, and it just brought this total sense of relief, like, whew, if I'm lost with somebody else. So I climb up, start talking to him. And he's like, yeah, I got lost too for a few minutes, but we went over a ridge. We got to go back around and come back the side of the hill, and we made our way back. And you don't think that probably sounds like a big deal, but in the moment, to hear my name called was this huge sense of relief. Our girls were young, probably 2 years old, and we were sleeping in our bedroom. We had been watching TV, and me and Stace and the girls all fell asleep on the bed together. And I had this dream, I guess, that I got electrocuted. And so I could feel my body shaking, and I couldn't move, and then I thought that our bed was being shocked or something, and everything was getting zapped. And I jump up out of bed, and I grab both girls in my arms, and I'm standing on the side of the bed, screaming at the top of my lungs. My girls are in each arm. I'm yelling because my wife's still on the bed, and I'm just screaming. Ah! At midnight, it's not funny. I think I've been shocked. I think our bed's electrocuted. I didn't do drugs and I wasn't drinking or anything. My girls are screaming. One of them has peed down me. I was in a state of disillusionment. And the next thing I know, I can just hear my wife saying, Corey, 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 Corey. And I was lost. And all of a sudden, by hearing my name called, somehow she brought me out of whatever I was in. And she brought peace to me. What is going on? Now, we didn't know. Man, we prayed through our house, slapped oil everywhere that you could slap oil in that time frame. We cast out demons, whether they were there or not. We did everything we possibly could because that never happened, and it hasn't happened since to me. We don't know what took place. But I was in a unbelievable state of whatever it was, trauma, half asleep. And what it took to bring peace to the moment was to hear my wife's voice saying, Corey, Corey, Corey. And it completely changed me from where I was to that place of solace and being able to comprehend once again. That's exactly what Jesus does with Mary. Mary, I know that you've experienced an earthquake, but here's the assurance and the aftershock. Your name. This is personal for you. The next thing that I want us to look at is Jesus, when he makes it personal with Mary, is number 2, he shows her where her position is. Where her position is to help her move forward. Now think about this. When Jesus does something like conquer death, defeat sin, don't you think like as soon as you rise up out of the grave, who are you going to go tell about it? Who are you going to show that you're alive? Who are you going to show that you just did something that nobody has ever done in the history of the earth, that you have come back alive? Who are you going to tell about it? I don't know about you. If I was Jesus and I really wanted the world to know, I might go find the greatest king on the earth at the time and say, I once was dead, but now I'm alive, and share it with him. And then hopefully, he'll begin to worship God, the true God, and he'll spread it to all of his people. Quite possibly, you might want to take and visit Pontius Pilate, like, hey, remember you had that dream? Well, guess what, buddy? You should have paid attention. Quite possibly, you would have went and visited the chief rabbi who was against you, that put you there to begin with. And you would have said, hey, remember me, the one that was also in the same faith as you, that you should have been looking for? Well, guess what? I once was dead, but now I'm alive. Punked you, buddy, right? There's a lot of people I could think that Jesus could have went to first, and maybe even had, greater repercussions of them knowing that he once was dead and now he's alive. I think about John, who's the beloved of all of the disciples, and how John was at the grave. He had the heart to seek after Jesus from the very moment that he could possibly be there. He was there. Why didn't he reveal himself to the beloved? Peter, the bold one. Peter, the one that he said is going to be sifted. Peter, the one that said he would never turn his back on Jesus. He would fight for him to the death. Peter, the one that then failed. Why not restore Peter right away? This guy's going to be on fire when he finds out what's taken place. Why didn't Jesus reveal himself to any one of those people? But who did he reveal himself to? Mary. That is unbelievable. Why in the world would he have revealed himself to Mary? Think about this. In their day, she's a woman. Like, they don't even believe the witness of a woman. So why would he have revealed himself to her first? And then not only as a woman, at one time she was considered a crazy woman. Like, who in her country is going to believe that she's even seen me alive? For crying out loud, she was demon-possessed. She had a bunch of demons inside of her. That's what she was known for, is her craziness. And now she's going to go tell people, oh, I saw Jesus, he's alive. Yeah, right. They just all come back inside of you sevenfold. You're still crazy. But think about it. He chose Mary. He could have chose Peter and John individually or both at the same time. And he could have chose anybody. And he chose Mary. She's the first one to hear. She's the first one to see. She was the first one to share. What did that mean to Mary? From culture's bottom rung on the ladder of life to the top. From the least to the greatest. From last to first. Jesus showed her her position in the rescue, and it assured her. It assured her. Jesus loved her. He loved her personally. He loved her expensively. And he loved her eternally. I want you to think about the expense. Yes, he gave his life for her. He gave his life for everyone. It cost him his life. But in my mind, I'm thinking, Here's a woman that quite possibly, it's believed, at one time broke an expensive jar of perfume and poured it over the feet of Jesus to prepare him for what was to come, to prepare him for this very moment in his life. She took a year's worth of wages and a bottle of perfume and sacrificed them, enough that even all of the disciples would have complained about what she did. And now Jesus is returning the favor. What you gave to me in worship was so valuable. And now what I'm giving to you has even greater value. I love you personally. I love you expensively. And I love you eternally. The third thing we see is that Jesus changes her perspective. I think about almost immediately when Mary finds out, she must have responded in a way that was familiar to her. That was familiar to her. When you come out of a traumatized state, you'll often respond out of instinct. You'll respond out of what's familiar to her. And fortunately, what had become familiar to her is not running away with another man, running away to make more money, running away to your old ways. But Jesus had impacted her life while he was on earth so much that what had become familiar to her is that when Jesus would say who he was while she's weeping uncontrollably, I imagine that she would fall at the feet of Jesus and wrap her arms around his legs and never want to let him go again, because that's what had become familiar to her. However, Jesus gives this odd response. In verse 17, Jesus said to her, "Do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father. But go to my brethren and say to them, I'm ascending to my Father and your Father, and to my God and to your God." Essentially, he says, quit being clingy. You guys ever felt that way before? Now, if you're a clinger, then maybe you don't know what it's like to be clung to. But you have, if you're, somebody that's ultimately in love, and sometimes people in love, they get real clingy and they always want to be, on you, holding your hand, beside you, snuggled up to you, that sort of thing. And some people, that drives them crazy. But then, let's take it from there in case you've never experienced that. Maybe you have kids and your kids just won't leave you alone, and they'll, hold on to your legs while you're trying to walk, and, they just want to be with you. They want to hold your hands. They want you to hold them, that sort of thing. And like that clinginess just drives you nuts, because you want them to be able to be on their own, right? It's not that you're going to leave them, just they need to stand up and be able to do something on their own. And so Jesus looks at her and he's like, quit clinging to me. I want you to get this. He wasn't being mean to her. You can't blame her for wanting to hold on to Jesus. The one that she loved, that she thought she lost, is now back and alive. But you have to understand the problem. Mary is intent on clinging to the Jesus that she wants. She's clinging to the wonderful teacher. She's clinging to a gifted man. She's clinging to the miracle worker who changed her life. But that's not what Mary needs. See, all too often we cling to the Jesus we want rather than the Jesus we need. And that's what he's trying to get across here. Some people, they want Jesus, the cuddly baby that comes in the Christmas story. He's innocent and sweet. He's always smiling. He's cuddly and affectionate. And you just want to hold him and cuddle him because he brings so much joy to your life, and he never really makes any demands from you. And that's the Jesus that you want in your life. Some people, they cling to Jesus, the moral teacher, because that's their personality or the way they were raised. This is the Jesus that makes the rules that we cannot break. And we think if we just have a set of rules in front of us and we can stick to them strictly, it helps us feel like we've accomplished something in life. And if I stick to those rules better than you stick to those rules, then that gives me some sort of self-satisfaction because I'm a better Christian than you. And that's the kind of Jesus that I want in my life, but it's not the kind of Jesus I need. You know what? You might be the kind of person that you want Jesus, the Prince of Peace, and so you cling to the Prince of Peace. Why? Not because you walk around with this solace and peace inside of you that goes beyond understanding. We can see that every time you go through something in life, but what you're looking for is the warm, fuzzy feelings on the inside. Some people, they will cling to Jesus, the goody giver, like he's a wishing well. Ask and you shall receive if you believe. Some people, they're looking for the righteous judge, Jesus. Man, if he would just return and judge all those stinking sinners in the world, this would be a whole lot better place. But it's not the Jesus we need. The point is, you can't pick and choose what kind of Jesus you want and only cling to that character aspect that you like. To be assured, you got to have the perspective of Jesus in your life. And I believe that's what Jesus is telling Mary in this statement. She was too focused in the moment on his humanity instead of his deity. She was acting as if his bodily presence is what was necessary, when the exact opposite is what was true. The Jesus needed most was the crucified and risen Savior of the world, who will forgive her sin and ascend into heaven and sit on the throne at the right hand of the Father and send the Holy Spirit to indwell in her so that she may be empowered. Point number 4, personalized. He made it personal. He positioned her. He's given her perspective. And now he's going to say what the mission is. Here's why you need to have perspective, because you need to be empowered to fulfill your mission. She needs the same resurrection power that raised Jesus from the grave to be able to move forward in what Jesus has called her to do. In the resurrection rescue story, and I'm going to close with this. The Jesus you need brings the assurance you need by making it personal, positioning you. Listen, this wasn't just for Mary, but he says you. You are the head and not the tail. You are more than a conqueror. First and not last. That's you. He's positioned you in life. No matter what people have told you, what they've made you feel like, no matter what they've done to you, he has positioned you for this very moment in life. He's positioned you to completely fulfill your purpose. Jesus assures you by making it personal, positioning you, giving you perspective. And finally, as we'll see over the next, what will become a new series, he'll give you the power to do what he's calling you to do. What'd he tell her? Go and tell my brethren. As I said, that would have been a meaningless statement in that culture. But all of a sudden, Mary is empowered, and she does what Jesus tells her to do. Verse 18, Mary Magdalene came and told the disciples. What'd she tell them? You remember at the beginning of this year, the power of a testimony? You remember at the beginning of this year how I talked about we're not standing on a street corner saying Jesus is coming, the end is near. But the greatest witness we can have is telling people, sharing with them our story, our experience with Jesus. This is how I don't know how it happens for everybody else, but I can tell you how it happened for me. And that's exactly what Mary does. She went and told the disciples that she had seen the Lord and told them the things that he told her. That's it. She fulfilled what Jesus had called her to do in that very moment. she had been assured in the aftershock.